All right, there we go. All right, this is Helen Thomas on the CDFM study group. So we're continuing with CDFM Module 1, Competency 1, Government Resource Management Environment. So I'm on page 1138, where it talks about the availability of funds. Remember, two things happens when Congress appropriates the funds. The Treasury issues the Treasury warrant. So remember, going back to Article 1 of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, where it says no money can be drawn out of the Treasury unless we have an appropriation law in place. Well, once Congress appropriates the funds, that's the notice to the Treasury that they can set up the account and the agencies can start spending based on their funding document. So the Treasury, the legal action tied to the Constitution, Article 1, is the Treasury issuing the Treasury warrants. The second thing that happens is OMB begins the apportionment process. So the agencies have to submit an SF-132 to OMB requesting their funds. DOD have to fill out an SF-132 within 10 days of the appropriation, and then they request their funding from Office of Management and Budget. Then OMB has 30 days after that to then issue the apportionment. So apportionment, I'm going to go over that again later, making sure when I say appropriation, you say who appropriates? Congress appropriates, OMB apportions funds to the agencies, and DOD issues allotment to the subordinate organization. So when we look at availability, we look at purpose, time, and amount. So that's part of fiscal law, right? When we talk about 31 U.S. Code, violation of the purpose, time, and amount. 31 U.S. Code, 1301, 1502, 1517, and 1341, 1342 for amount. So remember that fiscal law. We're going to go over those in a different video. The chart on the bottom of 1139 goes into the 10 days that I talk about with the SF-132. As soon as possible, the Treasury issues the Treasury warrant. The agencies within 10 days issue the SF-132. OMB begins the apportionment process. Ongoing execution reports that have to be submitted. Further down, the SF-133 is a quarterly report that the agencies have to submit to OMB, where you look at what you requested versus your actual. You compare those. So OSD reports to OMB quarterly with the SF-133 and the other agencies and so forth. So review that chart on the bottom of 139. Appropriation warrant 40 accounts for what the Treasury does. So it's either an appropriation warrant or a Treasury warrant. It's the same thing. That's the legal notification that the account's been set up and we have an appropriation law in place. Apportionment goes over on page 41, goes over what I already discussed. The SF-132 is the apportionment document. Even though it's approved, DOD and the other agencies have to submit the SF-132 requesting, Mother, may I have my allotment? OMB, can I have my allotment? So the SF-132. 1142 talks about deferrals and rescission. Defer, meaning we can postpone. If Congress appropriates funding for a particular purpose, I don't need it right this second, but you can defer, postpone the use of those funds so that I can fund something else. Of course, all of this is with approval from Congress. Rescission, what Congress can rescind, is to cancel the use of a fund. Hey, when we requested this and we started this request 18 months ago, we thought we needed these funds for this purpose, but we no longer need that purpose. So once DOD gets their apportionment, DOD issues allotment. So on page 1143, agency management of funds, we go through the allotment, commitment, obligation, and not disbursement. In CDFM, you got to learn the term outlay. And I'll show you that On page 1145, Congress appropriates, OMB apportions, DOD is an agency that allots, commits, obligates, and outlay. So outlay is the official term when you read through all of this and get the definition. Funds that have actually been moved from the Treasury. So when the official movement of those payments and those funds from the Treasury to pay the bill, it is called outlay. All right, what else? The federal budget process, performance review and audit. So we got to have audits, right? Because we got to make sure that the funds are being used properly. So the steps is monitoring. You got to do all your checks, your internal control, your administrative control of funds. You got to do your reviews, your audits. So that's what it's talking about there. 1147 talks about congressional oversight. So in the beginning, Congress say do, don't, must, no lower than, no higher than. Congress has an external auditing agency that works directly for them to make sure that the executive branch, because the budget belongs to the executive branch, president, make sure that the executive branch is using the funds in the manner in which Congress approved. So GAO is that oversight agency, Government Accountability Office. So agencies as directed in Module 1, Competency 3, and Module 3, Competency 4, Auditing, Internal Control and Auditing, are required to establish continuing programs. So that's what they're talking about there. So more on the federal budget process. So I'm going to go past the terms, but make sure you review the terms and the definition. But I want to go to the budget to show the breakdown. So the federal budget, we have revenue and we have expenses. Real simple. Where does the government get its money? Revenues. Revenues come from the bottom. 50%. So whenever the political leaders start talking about raising taxes, yes, that's why, because 50% of how the country makes money comes from the taxes that we pay. So individual income tax accounts for 50%. Social Security, Medicare, that they take out your paycheck for those of us that work, that counts to 36%. So you don't necessarily have to memorize all the percentages, but know which one has a major impact. Individual income tax and Social Security accounts for the majority of the revenue that the country gets. And so the next page goes into spending. This is where we run into problems. Just like in our individual lives, if you start spending more than what you're bringing in, you're going to start running into some problems, right? So let's see how the federal expenses are broken down. It's broken down into direct or mandatory bills and discretionary bills. Direct and mandatory are bills we have to pay. Like we say, civ pay is a must fund. I got to get my paycheck, must fund. Likewise, the federal government has must funds, direct, mandatory. But look at the percentage. 70% of all the bills that we pay are must funds. So only 30% is left to do everything else. So when you think about our education, our State Department, we only have 30% of the money left to distribute. Oh, and DOD gets the majority of the discretionary, right? Half of it actually, because if you look at the bottom of page 1152, it says National Defense discretionary, 15.3%. Well, 15 and 15 to me is 30. So DOD gets half of the discretionary and the rest of the agencies have to fight for that other 15 or 14.7 really of non-discretionary spending. Social Security, 23%, right? Those are mandatory bills. So they give you the breakdown, but the bottom line is 70% of our expenses goes to mandatory bill, 30% to discretionary, meaning we get to pick what we do with it. But of that 30%, 15.3% is a defense-related expense. So whenever they start looking for areas to cut, hence the reason DOD is always first on the chopping block, because they're getting the majority of the funding. So the federal budget spending versus your revenue, what you take in versus what you're spending. So the next few pages is simply different laws that you need to be familiar with. Just kind of review them. We talked about some of them. And then on page 54 is a chart of additional laws. You got to know the 1990 Chief Financial Officers Act. That always comes up. We talked about the 1993 GPRA, and then they redid it in 2010, the Modernization Act. I introduced the Line Item Veto Act of 1996 to you when we talked about presidential action once he receives a bill. So you've got to be able to tie the information together. Do not view them as independent topics, because they overlap. So I just wanted to finish up what we started with CDFM Module 1, Competency 1 out of the 2020 Study Guide, Government Resource Management Environment. Be sure to subscribe so that as I continue to update these videos, that you will get notification of the updates. Share the website, share the YouTube videos so that others who are studying can also have these resources. It's free to you. I'm not charging anyone, so don't have ASMC coming to look for me. I promote ASMC for people to become members, and also I promote the CDFM because I think it's essential for people to set themselves apart as a professional in your field, financial manager. So this is Helen Thomas and the CDFM study group signing off. I'll see you guys again next time.